Welcome, dear brave listener. You're tuning in to Careful TV, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Whether you're tuning in during the day or late at night, thank you for choosing to spend a part of your time with me. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and means more than you know. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, what brought you here, or even what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Your support keeps this channel going, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let's get into today's horror story. I'd just come out of a long-term relationship that had lasted nearly 4 years. We were close to moving in together, had talked about getting engaged, and honestly, I thought we were building towards something permanent. I'm Riley, 27, and after it ended, I took a solid few months to be alone, process everything, and to try to figure out who I was without someone else shaping my life. My friends noticed I'd become hermetic, disappearing into my apartment for weekends, binging shows, and avoiding social situations. And eventually they started nudging me toward dating again. Not seriously, just casual, get back out their dates to remind me that people exist outside my walls. I wasn't really interested. I mean, after what I'd just been through, the last thing I wanted was to jump into anything remotely serious. But I trusted my friend's judgment enough to agree to a few casual meetups, which meant scrolling through Tinder again, swiping without hope, mostly out of curiosity. That's how I ended up matching with her, a woman named Casey, home from college for the summer. Her profile was simple. A couple of selfies in different locations, a shot at a coffee shop, and one group picture with friends at some festival. She seemed eager to meet, even willing to travel across town to see me. Honestly, I was indifferent, but my friends had framed it as practice, so I agreed to a casual lunch. From the start, I made it explicit that I wasn't looking for anything serious. I told her straight, I had just come out of a serious relationship. I wasn't interested in dating, and I was just looking for a casual interaction, maybe some company for a few hours. Casey said she understood, but she seemed unusually persistent, like the idea of meeting me mattered a lot more than it should have at that point. I chalked it up to enthusiasm and tried to stay polite. We chose a local sports bar for lunch. I arrived first and noticed her waiting near the entrance. Walking up, I immediately realized that she looked different than her Tinder pictures. Not drastically, but enough to catch me off guard. Her hair was longer and darker, tattoos in places that didn't exist in her photos, and her smile, while friendly, carried an anxious edge. I told myself it didn't matter. This was just lunch, after all, and I wasn't here to judge looks. The first hour was odd. She was incredibly shy, barely making eye contact, and her responses were almost entirely one-word answers. I tried to engage her, asking about her major, where she grew up, what music she liked. I even commented on her tattoos, attempting to draw out a story, but she seemed almost frozen with nerves. I tried to give her space, thinking maybe this was just first date anxiety, and I appreciated that her hands shook slightly when she reached for her drink. It made her seem human, vulnerable even. Then she pulled out a small book from her bag and slid it across the table. "I got this for you," she said. I was taken aback, but thanked her, genuinely curious about the gesture. "Oh, that's sweet. What's it about?" I asked. She stared at me, eyebrows furrowed, and said sharply, "You're kidding, right? This is your favorite book. You told me this was your favorite book." I froze. "No," I replied. "I've literally never heard of it." A tense silence passed before she laughed awkwardly, embarrassed, and apologized, saying she must have confused me with someone else. I smiled, trying to ease the tension. Tinder, after all, was full of mix-ups and misunderstandings. I laughed it off, hoping we could move past it. By the time lunch ended, I was ready to leave. I told her I had errands to run, laundry, feeding my pets, the usual, hoping she'd take the cue. But instead, she insisted we do something else. "Let's go for a walk in the park," she suggested, her tone eager, almost pleading. Against my better judgment, I agreed, thinking a short walk couldn't hurt. The park was bustling. Children played basketball nearby, joggers passed, and the sun was bright. Yet, as soon as we sat on a bench, the dynamic shifted. Casey, who had been timid and almost mute during lunch, suddenly leaned in and kissed me aggressively. Tongue, full intensity, no warning. I froze, shocked, unsure of how to react. My body felt like it had betrayed me, refusing movement, and all I could do was hope she'd notice my lack of response. Before I could fully process what was happening, a man passed by. One of those people to look for any opportunity to harass. He whistled, catcalled, and even suggested some crude threesome scenario. My heart raced. "No, I'm fine, please," I said repeatedly, trying to maintain calm. But Casey just laughed, as if it were a joke. I was bewildered. The timid, anxious woman I'd met at lodge had turned into someone completely unpredictable. I wanted out, needed out. I attempted to stand, creating distance, but she moved closer, whispering, "Did you like that? Do you think I'm sexy? Do you want me?" Panic surged. "I really need to go home," I said firmly. She didn't seem to hear me, and when I said she couldn't come with me, she argued, trying to persuade me. I repeated myself multiple times, each time more insistent, and eventually she relented enough for me to escape to my car. Even as I drove away, my chest still tight, she sent me a message through Tinder, asking for a second date. I ignored it initially, hoping the request would taper off. Instead, the messages escalated. Confusion, frustration, even a tone that implied I'd let her on. I responded once, politely but firmly, reminding her that I wasn't looking for anything and that our first date had not indicated mutual interest. The messages didn't stop. She began calling repeatedly, her persistence crossing a line I wasn't willing to tolerate. By the end of the night, I had no choice but to block her number entirely. Reflecting on the experience, I realized how quickly a Tinder date can shift from benign to stressful. It wasn't violent or overtly threatening, but the intensity and disregard for boundaries made the situation genuinely unnerving. A shy, awkward individual could transform into someone overbearing in a matter of minutes, and my own lack of readiness for dating made it feel worse. I learned a few lessons that day. Explicit communication is essential. Instincts matter more than politeness, and it's okay to end a date immediately if the interaction feels unsafe or overwhelming. Tinder made it possible for this encounter to occur. The app connected me with someone I would never have met otherwise, but it also reminded me that digital assurances can never replace real-world discernment. Months later, I still remember the rush of anxiety, the sudden shift in demeanor, and the man in the park who compounded an already tense situation. It shaped how I approach new Tinder matches now. I check in with friends before meeting anyone, choose public spaces I'm familiar with, and trust my instincts over digital cues. It's not paranoia, it's prudence. Dating after a long-term relationship is challenging enough without adding unpredictable encounters into the mix. That lunch and park walk taught me boundaries aren't optional, and signals, both subtle and overt, are worth listening to. Even the smallest gestures, like persistent questions or sudden physical advances, can tell you more than the smooth words in a Tinder chat. Ultimately, I walked away without harm, but the story serves as a reminder that Tinder dates can be unpredictable, and preparedness is key. I moved on since, but I carry the awareness, the caution, and the understanding that not every date is what it seems, and that's okay. Protecting yourself is not only wise, it's necessary. I had just ended a long-term relationship that had lasted nearly 5 years. It was messy, emotionally draining, and left me feeling untethered. My friends, seeing me retreat into my apartment and avoid the world, started nudging me toward online dating. Just for fun, they said. Swipe a little, see who's out there. No pressure. I wasn't entirely convinced, but curiosity won out. I downloaded Tinder, scrolling through profiles with a mix of boredom and mild hope, wondering if I was ready to even meet someone new. My name's Jordan, 30, and I've always considered myself cautious when it comes to people. I like to think I can read intentions, but even I can underestimate how quickly a situation can shift. After a few days of swiping, I matched with someone named Mara. She had an easy smile in her photos, a few casual selfies, and what looked like an approachable demeanor. Messaging on Tinder was light at first, small talk, jokes, some mutual interests. She was a little older than me, but seemed fun, confident, and not demanding. Over a week, our messages became more frequent, and eventually she suggested meeting for drinks at a downtown bar. I agreed, thinking a short, public date would be safe enough. The evening started normally. Mara arrived before me, wearing a dress that was a bit more formal than I expected, but nothing alarming. At first glance, she didn't quite resemble her Tinder pictures. Slightly heavier, her hair different than the profile shots. But I told myself it didn't matter. We greeted each other, ordered drinks, and started talking. Conversation flowed smoothly at first. Music, work, favorite spots in the city, typical first date stuff. I tried to relax, telling myself this was casual, just a fun outing with someone new. Then, almost abruptly, Mara steered the conversation in a direction I wasn't prepared for. "Let's talk about sex," she said casually, as if it were the most normal topic in the world. My chest tightened, my drink suddenly tasted metallic. I froze, not knowing how to respond. She leaned in, speaking with a confidence that bordered on unnerving, asking me about past relationships and intimate experiences. I tried to respond lightly, making vague comments and jokes, hoping to steer the conversation away from personal territory. Her own stories were startlingly detailed, dramatic, and, honestly, a little frightening. At one point, she leaned closer, her voice dropping just enough to make me uncomfortable. She told me she enjoyed BDSM, not in a casual way, but as something extreme. She spoke of tormenting partners, of orchestrating experiences that made others panic, and she seemed proud of it. My stomach lurched. One story she shared in particular made me want to throw up. She described luring a man to her apartment, then tricking him into lying on a bed scattered with thumbtacks. She mimed his cries and protests, laughing as she did it. The realism of her detail, the ease with which she recounted it, made my skin crawl. I tried to maintain composure, sipping my drink quickly, thinking of excuses to leave. I told myself maybe she was exaggerating, maybe it was a dark joke, but every instinct screamed at me that this was not normal. Before I could process it further, she told another story, one that made my blood run cold. According to her, she had met someone from Tinder the week before, convinced him to invite her to his apartment, and had come fully prepared with a bag of what she called tools. She described wrapping him from head to toe in plastic wrap, leaving him immobilized, and walking away while he struggled. She laughed as she imitated his muffled protests, sipping her drink like it was a casual anecdote from brunch with friends. I realized at that moment that my presence there was not just uncomfortable, it could be dangerous. The casual flirtation, the shared smiles, the jokes about music and work, it all dissolved under the weight of her revelations. My hands were trembling slightly, my mind racing to find a safe exit. I couldn't stay. I couldn't even entertain the idea that this might be a joke. I stood, careful not to startle her, and muttered an excuse about needing to leave early. She leaned in as if to kiss me, but I dodged gently, keeping a physical buffer between us. I walked toward the door with deliberate speed, ignoring the curious glances from other bar patrons. The night air outside felt like salvation. I took deep breaths, hands in pockets, walking quickly toward my car, checking constantly to make sure she wasn't following. Even as I drove away, my body was still on high alert. I replayed her words, her stories, her laugh. I felt a strange mix of disbelief and dread. How could someone recount such actions so casually? Was this bravado, an extreme version of "look how edgy I am"? Or had she truly done these things? I didn't want to know the answer. All I wanted was distance, to reclaim the sense of safety I'd had before logging on a Tinder that week. Mara didn't stop contacting me immediately. That night, she sent a message on Tinder thanking me for meeting her, asking if I'd like a second date. I didn't reply. Then more messages came. Confusion, frustration, even veiled accusations that I'd led her on. I felt my chest tighten with every ping of my phone. I wanted to be polite, but I also wanted to maintain boundaries and protect myself. Eventually, the texts escalated to phone calls. I blocked her number after the third attempt. Reflecting on it now, the encounter was a stark lesson in the dangers that can lurk behind curated profiles. Tinder had facilitated a connection that, on the surface, seemed benign, casual, even fun. But behind the smiles and the photos was someone whose behavior and stories signaled extreme risk. My instincts, which I had occasionally discounted in the past, were right. The signals had been there all along. The forwardness of the conversation, the sudden shift from shy to intense, the casual discussion of acts that could harm others. All of it screamed that I needed to remove myself. In the weeks that followed, I felt a mix of relief and lingering unease. Relief that I had left safely. Unease because the encounter was so plausible. It could happen to anyone on a dating app if they weren't vigilant. I became hyper-aware of first meetings, public spaces, and the importance of having an exit plan. I learned to trust the subtle cues. Overly intense enthusiasm, disregard for boundaries, sudden shifts in tone or demeanor. Even now, months later, I think about that night and the rapid transition from ordinary to unnerving. The story Mara shared, whether real or fabricated, reshaped how I approach Tinder and dating in general. I made sure to meet in well-lit, populated areas, inform friends of my plans, and pay attention to those quiet alarms in my head that signal when something is off. It's not paranoia, it's precaution. What started as an attempt to reintroduce myself to the world after heartbreak became a harsh reminder that appearances can be deceiving. Tinder can facilitate genuine connections, but it can also place you in situations where the risk is real and immediate. I walked away safely that night, but the lessons I learned stayed with me. Communicate boundaries clearly, trust your instincts, and always prioritize personal safety over politeness or curiosity. That evening with Mara was brief but intense, a stark illustration of how quickly a first date can escalate from casual to threatening. I don't regret using Tinder, but I do approach it with a respect for the potential unpredictability it carries. I've had other matches since, some pleasant, some dull, but none have approached that level of unsettling intensity. I carry the memory not as fear, but as a guide, a reminder that vigilance is essential, that instincts matter, and that leaving the situation the moment it feels wrong is always the right choice. I'd never really been big on online dating. I tried a few acts in high school and college. Hot or not, plenty of fish, but mostly ran into bots or people who seemed more interested in scams than actual connections. By the time I was 24, I'd pretty much given up. Still, one Friday afternoon in Los Angeles, I was bored and restless. I had a few hours with nothing to do, and on a whim, I downloaded Tinder. I told myself it was just to see what was out there. Nothing serious, just curiosity. My name's Cameron, 24, and I identify as bisexual, though I've never been one for labels. is more that I'm open-minded about who I connect with, not that I actively chase anyone in particular. Within half an hour of swiping, I got a match. His name was Liam, 26, and at first glance, he seemed normal, attractive, casual photos, some with friends, some gaming, a few at concerts. We started messaging, and almost immediately, he opened with something simple but oddly personal. "Hey, you seem new here. Thought I'd say hi." I said hi back, and before long, we were chatting about video games, programming, and favorite movies. He mentioned working as a software developer, saying he mostly worked 4 hours a day, but made a comfortable living. I thought, okay, maybe this is casual, harmless fun. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we hang out. I offered, since I lived alone, that he could come by my apartment. He mentioned he still lived with his parents. He seemed enthusiastic, maybe too enthusiastic, but I figure it was just excitement. We agreed he'd come over in an hour, which gave me just enough time to tidy my room, set up my gaming station, and convince myself this was fine. Looking back, I could see the first mistake was inviting someone over whom I'd never met in person. When the knock came, I peeked through the peephole. There was Liam, holding a bottle of red wine and grinning. I hadn't expected him to bring anything, and we hadn't discussed drinking, but I noticed that the brand he had was my favorite. I opened the door, surprised. "That's my favorite," I said, half joking, half curious. He laughed, claiming he just had a feeling it would be. I invited him in, and we sat on the balcony, sipping the wine and talking about life, work, and growing up. At first it was easy, casual, comfortable. After a couple of glasses, we moved inside to play some games. Things are going fine, fun even. At one point, he showed me his laptop and some of the coding projects he was working on. I excused myself to use the bathroom, assuming he'd wait patiently outside. That's when everything went wrong. I barely had the door closed behind me when I felt movement behind me. He had turned the doorknob, found it unlocked, and walked right in. Before I could react, he pressed himself against me from behind, grinding and grasping my shoulders. Shocked, I shoved him off and tried to laugh it off. "Okay, that's a bit intrusive," I said, trying to maintain composure. He smiled, brushing it off casually, saying he just wanted to see how I'd react. My stomach twisted in a way I hadn't felt in years. Fear, confusion, panic all at once. I left the bathroom quickly, thinking I could distract him by offering more wine or water. As I reached the kitchen, he suddenly pressed himself against me again, this time groping me in a way that was invasive and deliberate. My body froze for a moment, stunned. Then I shoved him forcefully and raised my voice. "We just met. This is not okay," I said, trying to keep my panic from rising. He laughed, his tone unnervingly casual. "In the LGBTQ community, boundaries are flexible," he said, almost taunting. My chest tightened. "I'm not being homophobic," I said, trying to calm my racing mind. "I'm just telling you, that's crossing major boundaries." He shrugged, grinning, and said he had to go. Relief washed over me in a way I hadn't expected. I walked him to the door. He left without any goodbyes, not even a casual wave, and I immediately locked it behind him. I told myself the nightmare was over. I tried to shake off the anxiety, convincing myself that it had been just bad judgment on my part, inviting someone over without a lock on the bathroom door. I started taking a shower, hoping the warm water would calm my nerves. That's when I heard it, a faint tink, tink, tink coming from near the bathroom door. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then I saw it. Liam crouched outside the sliding bathroom door, holding a spoon to peer under. I froze, my towel forgotten. For a moment, I considered saying something, confronting him, but every part of me screamed to stay calm, to not give him a reaction. I slowly turned off the water and stepped out, wrapped a towel around my waist. Before I could even open the door, I heard a click, the unmistakable sound of a phone taking a picture. I flung the door open, and he bolted down the hall, out the front door, and I watched him get into a white Honda Civic and drive away. I don't know what he captured with that photo or why, but the thought made my stomach churn. I immediately blocked him on Tinder, and for the next several hours, I sat rigid in my apartment, checking every window, every lock, every sound. After that day, I realized how quickly a casual, seemingly normal interaction can spiral into a situation where boundaries are disregarded entirely. The fun, easy conversation, the shared interest, the wine, all of it had been a prelude to something invasive, something predatory. My trust in my instincts, which I had always taken lightly, became something I realized I couldn't ignore. I hadn't anticipated that someone could switch from friendly to violating my personal space in moments, but it had happened. I told myself I'd never invite someone in my home from Tinder again, not without precautions. Locks, cameras, even having someone else nearby became necessary. I replayed the encounter over and over, wondering what could have happened if I'd been more alone, more vulnerable, less prepared. It was a stark reminder that the world doesn't always match our expectations, that appearances, especially curated online ones, are deceiving. Weeks later, I would log back into Tinder hesitantly, more aware, more guarded. I'm matched with people who seem nice, who respected boundaries, and yet a part of me could never shake the memory of that afternoon. That surreal, frightening sequence. The groping, the bathroom intrusion, the photo, stayed vivid in my mind, a cautionary tale I would carry for years. I didn't report him to the police, partly because I wasn't sure what legal grounds I would have, partly because I just wanted the experience to be behind me. But I did take measures to ensure it couldn't happen again. Locks on all doors, verification of rides before letting someone in, never leaving a bathroom door unlocked. Small things that suddenly felt monumental. Looking back, it's unsettling how quickly an ordinary Tinder date can transform. A shared love for games, mutual humor, and light conversation can vanish in a heartbeat when boundaries are ignored. My trust was tested in ways I hadn't anticipated, but ultimately, I walked away physically unharmed, if emotionally shaken. It's a lesson in caution, in awareness, in the necessity of trusting instincts even when you want to believe in the best of people. Now, whenever I open Tinder, I do so with a careful vigilance. I read profiles critically, I insist on public meetings first, and I always let someone close know where I'm going. The acts themselves aren't dangerous. It's the people behind the profiles who could be unpredictable. That afternoon with Liam was a harsh, vivid reminder of how quickly comfort can shift to alarm, and how necessary it is to protect yourself even when you think you're just having a casual, harmless interaction.